Ilan, you are up first.
On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated an act of genocide against the people of Israel.
No.
Its death squads invaded with a clear mission: to massacre as many people as they could, as sadistically as they could, and to take survivors as hostages. Hamas had a strategy to lure Israel into an urban war and generate enough suffering that the world would pressure Israel to leave Hamas alone.
Israel's always the victim. They're being lured by like a ragtag group of terrorists and Islamist fighters when Israel is backed by the most powerful military on earth. You know, Israel's always just reacting to the things that happen to them. They're never the actor. They always react. Classic. Also, the obsession with the narrative that Hamas was trying to massacre people in the most, like, vicious and painful way possible is, to me, in many ways, like the kind of extremist obsession you see with fascists, where, like, Hamas fighters can't just be terrorists or militants who are okay with civilian death. They have to all be, like, individually, like, you know, crazy, sociopathic, sadistic Hannibal Lecter types.
Hamas slaughtered 1,200 people on that day
well,
at a
the
music
IDF
festival
killed a lot
and
of them.
in their beds. They cremated little children alive. They beheaded, tortured, and mutilated their victims alive and dead, and they did it with glee. And then they took...
Say like this, did it with glee. Like this is this narrativizing about like Hamas aren't just evil. And a lot of the people in Hamas are like really bad. They're like Islamist, like crazy anti-Semite. Like, yeah, no, we're not defending Hamas, but it's about the narrative, right?
At this point, Israel faced a choice, as Hamas immediately threatened to do it again and again until Israel was destroyed.
How could Hamas ever destroy Israel? How does that even work? Come on.
Targeting Hamas's terrorists in accordance with international law in order to dismantle their ability to wage war.
It's a good thing that, like, international law hasn't condemned Israel then, or that'd be, like, super awkward.
In response, Israel's actions are to take unprecedented efforts to keep their civilians safe from their own leader's sick strategy to sacrifice them on the altar of jihad.
This is, again, like, it's the rhetoric of fascist. They can't, a fascist, a Zionist, can't merely make a claim. They have to make it to a point of absurdity. Israel has gone to the greatest lengths imaginable to protect civilians and to prevent people from being altered on the altar to jihad. Altar to jihad? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, you can never just make a claim. It always has to be elevated to absurdity. You know? Yeah, the world's most moral army. October 7th was the deadliest terror attack. Well, it depends on what you mean by terror attack, man. Like, it's always stuff like this.
My question then is this.
Ilan, I'm sorry, your time is up.
What does October 7th?
I'm sorry, your time is up. Mehdi Hasan, you are answering no in answer to the question, were Israel's actions in the Gaza war justified?
All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, the question, were they justified? Were the actions justified? No, obviously not. Of course not. October the 7th, I think we can all agree, was a crime, a war crime, right? We can all agree on that. And taking hostages is a war crime. And those hostages should be released. But to destroy an entire place, an entire people in response is never justified. Never justified. How are we still I don't understand how we're debating this more than 40,000 deaths later. I don't understand how we're still debating this sitting in the comfort of New York, 7,000 miles away from a place that the UN Secretary General has called hell on earth. Justified? Justified?
He's so fucking
Was Israel
good, man.
justified in carrying out one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history, according to Dr. Robert Pape at the University of Chicago, dropping 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs on schools, hospitals, universities, bookstores, libraries, mosques, churches, refugee camps, apartment buildings, cemeteries.
You remember when the Biden administration, in showing like perhaps a sliver of one vertebra of a spine, briefly delayed providing Israel with 2,000-pound bombs, a weapon which can only be used for collateral damage. A 2,000-pound bomb produces an explosion which is so large that it cannot be used in an urban warfare context without, like, at the very least, endangering, likely killing civilians. They've certainly killed a lot of civilians. And Israel instantly screeched about how Biden was preventing them from fighting the war and he wanted Hamas to win and so forth and so forth, right? Their precision 2,000-pound bombs? Yeah, that's true.
Was Israel justified in telling people to go to safe zones and then bombing them and killing them in those safe zones? According to NBC, there were 7 deadly airstrikes between January and April in areas that the Israeli military had specifically designated as safe zones, killing Palestinian civilians like Sabrine Sakani, who was 30 weeks pregnant at the time. She was killed in a safe zone in April. Her little baby, newborn baby, died less than a week later. Was that justified too, Elon? Was Israel justified in killing a record number of kids in Gaza, 16,000 children, turning Gaza into what the UN has called a graveyard for children, according to Save the Children, killing more kids in the first 3 weeks that were killed globally in each of the past 4 years?
Can we get him on the 1v20 Jubilee videos? I think that would be very good content. Jubilee, are you watching this? I'm just saying. It wouldn't be very fair, but, you know.
Elon himself has produced a number of lies in service of those war crimes. He has a bunch of tweets still up tonight which say that babies were beheaded on October the 7th, babies were baked in ovens, babies were ripped from their mother's wombs. October 7th was bad enough, but Elon had to exaggerate it for atrocity purposes. Those tweets are still up. Why would you trust anything this man says to you tonight?
Yeah, see, that's kind of the point that I make too, right? You could never... See, maybe this is just because I'm a different kind of guy, but when Hamas killed a bunch of Israeli civilians on October 7th, I thought that was bad. I know, crazy stuff, right? I thought that was, like, really morally wrong for them to do that, but that's not enough to the fascist. It's never enough to use reality because the fascist despises reality. They have to invent an imaginary, hyperbolized reality in which they are ludicrously morally in the right and their enemies are disgustingly, demonically, and it's never for sociological reasons. The fascist can never acknowledge that environmental conditions shape people, because if you do that, then you have to ask, what environmental conditions have Palestinians been subjected to that might make them not like Israel? Oh, hold on. Now we're getting into history we don't want to look into. No, 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 no.
Look, he's here. He's here. He's here to gaslight you, to defend the indefensible, to excuse the inexcusable, to justify the unjustifiable, but you don't need to. Tonight you can choose to be on the side not of cruelty, not of criminality, but on the side of the innocent people of Gaza who are being killed as we speak tonight, as we speak, by Elon's former colleagues in the Israeli military on the orders of Elon's former bosses in the Israeli government. So yes, I choose to oppose this horrific and homicidal motion. Thank you.
Notice how a seasoned debater, maybe one of the most seasoned debaters, Mehdi Hasan, did not go point by point responding to what the fascists said, but rather led with his own strong opening argument, only referring to tendencies in or patterns in what the fascists said.
Last October, shortly after October 7th, Israeli forces struck a 3-story residential building in Gaza City. They killed 15 members of the Al-Dos family, 7 children. According to Amnesty International, the survivors say no warnings. Elon told us there were warnings. No warnings were given to evacuate. Amnesty found no evidence of any military targets in the area, and Israel to this day has offered no explanation for that strike. So for the dead Al-Dos family members, Elon, can you tell us why they were killed?
Mr. Hasan, the IDF does not owe you immediate answers, and the fact that
That's the debate in a nutshell right there. Israel is fighting the most moral war ever. Okay, why did you just randomly murk this apartment building for no reason that no one has gotten an explanation for? We don't owe you an explanation for our methods. Yeah, that's pretty much it, right?
Even Joe Biden, the most
what does October 7th
Joe Biden,
justify?
I already answered that question. Even Joe Biden, the most pro-Israel president of my lifetime, who has backed Israel with weapons and arms, has gone on the record saying too much indiscriminate bombing. You've killed too many innocent people. Even the people on your own side say you're killing too many people, Elon. But you will not accept that.
Mr. Hasan, too many people have been killed. The number of people who should have been killed...
Too many people have been killed, not assigning, like, blame or responsibility, even though 90%, 95%, whatever, a significant, overwhelming percentage of the people who have been killed by the IDF, you know.
0. Too many people were killed when Hamas's psychopath leaders... When Hamas's psychopath leaders...
Psychopath leaders, again, we refer once more to psychology. It can't be that material... And pardon me for, like, the Marxist soy analysis over here, but it is very, very important. They must always be animals. This is like the fundamental belief of the fascist when assigning the in-group and out-group. The out-group can never just be a group of people with different beliefs, because if you accept that it's just a group of people with different beliefs, that invites questions. Why do they have those different beliefs? What led them to have those beliefs? They have to be animals. They always have to be animals.
If we had known, Mr. Hasan, what Hamas was going to do on October 7th, perhaps we should have started a preemptive war to eliminate...
See? I mean, like, it doesn't even, like, need analysis, really. It's just always, like, this is always the answer to the fascist. Like, perhaps if we had known the population was just naturally, you know, evil, we should have eradicated them to begin with.
Is Israel's war in Gaza making Israel more secure?
When this war began, Hamas had a fearsome missile arsenal that rained thousands of missiles on our cities. I had to keep running into a rocket shelter. Israel has now eliminated the threat of rocket fire from Gaza. It has cut off its smuggling routes, it has destroyed its missile silos, and it has destroyed Hamas's weapons capabilities. That alone has made us safer and makes it easier to sleep in our beds at night.
And yet, Netanyahu still says the war won't stop. In fact, not only has Netanyahu not said the war will stop, he has said he is opposed to any ceasefire and refuses to give any timeline for stopping the war.
Things. Number one, the Israelis went to Supreme Court recently and they were having an argument in Israel Supreme Court and they put in the official filing that we do not control Gaza. Even after all this time, Hamas is still in control of lots of parts of Gaza. So they say the honest stuff when you're not looking. Number two, I interviewed Ami Ayalon recently, former head of Shin Bet, former Israeli admiral. He said very explicitly, Israel will not be safe until we give Palestinians freedom. This is his words, not my words. And number three,
Did Vaush speed it up? It's at 1.1 times.
I'm glad you had a bomb shelter to protect you because the Al-Dos family in Gaza did not have a bomb shelter.
Back to the point. Got that right here.
Another question we have not yet talked about the hostages, and we should. Is Israel's action in Gaza going to is it for the benefit of the hostages?
Absolutely. Israel is fighting to
This is like a comical point to defend. The idea that this is being done to the benefit of the hostages, almost all of whom are dead and gone, when Netanyahu refuses any hostage exchange. Like, it's ridiculous.
bring the hostages home while Hamas is starving and torturing and raping them. We managed in November, because Hamas was being clobbered, and it wanted a breather. They released nearly half...
The families of the hostages all hate Netanyahu. The protests outside in Tel Aviv are largely directed at Netanyahu for not accepting a ceasefire deal because they want the hostages back home. Doesn't give a shit about them.
Of the two of us, whose strategy has released more hostages, mine or yours? Because I supported a ceasefire. And we got, hold on.
Our strategy. Your strategy is to give cover for Hamas's war crimes.
Let him finish, please.
Over 100 hostages were released last November in the pause, in the ceasefire deal. A lot of Israelis wanted that to continue. Hostages' families wanted that to continue.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the only time we got a significant release of hostages, was the one time they tried, like, a ceasefire deal, even though it was very temporary. And then Netanyahu was like, never again will I take a break from killing Palestinian civilians. Never again. That fucking sucked. You know, he's getting withdrawals. Netanyahu's like... in the, you know, leaning against his desk. He's not doing that again.
Elon and people like Elon use the hostages as political pawns. The hostages' families are standing on the streets of Tel Aviv opposing the Netanyahu government, calling for a ceasefire, calling for a deal. They don't like Elon leaving. They don't support Elon.
Mr. Hasan, how many hostage rallies have you spoken at? How many hostages' mothers have you embraced and hugged them and told them...
See, right, again, confronted with the facts, the fact that hostage families hate Netanyahu, we get this irrational, hysterical screeching, how many hostage families have you kissed on the lips? This, like, completely, like, not even a pretense of a rational argument. Just like, you know, how dare you?
Mr. Hasan, if you really care about the hostages,
Let me ask you,
I have a spare hostage pin. If you want to show them you care, you're welcome to put it on your tracker.
You may have brought up an objective fact, but I have a pin on me where I say, bring the hostages home. Take this virtue signal, Hasan, and shove it up your butthole.
Let's be clear. You saw the very, very performative outrage there from Elon there. To be clear, don't you lecture me about hostages when your government has killed more hostages than it has rescued. That's on you. That's on you.
You hear him? He's saying that is on Hamas. Like, again, the fascists can never accept responsibility for their own behavior or for the behavior of the state they defend. Everything is reactive. Everything is defensive. Everything is someone else forced us to do it. Every single time.
My question is, given the current circumstances, do you believe that Israel pulling out of Gaza in 2005 was the right decision?
Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005 and never wanted to go back. It gave them...
Yeah, well, you know where Israel did want to go back to? The perimeter around the Gaza Strip, which it immediately fenced, put automated turrets, put a bunch of guards, you know, rigged that shit up to the to the gills, cut off water, cut off aid.
Gaza, they had the option to turn it into Singapore. They chose to turn it into Mosul. They could have...
That's so true, man. That's definitely not a statement made by a fucking insane lunatic. Yeah, the Gaza Strip was definitely poised in a position to become Singapore.
After the sadistic massacre of...
Again, I'm just we're running through the greats right here at the end, okay? It's always about good and evil. It's never about what actually happens. It's always like the narrative of good and evil. It's about the story you tell.
October 7th. Hamas immediately told us, if you leave us on our feet, we will do this again and again. It wasn't enough to cremate little children. It wasn't enough to commit acts of gang rape, pedophilia, necrophilia. It wasn't...
Again, like literally, like me reading through the giant list of scary things. Like, I'm sorry, I have no respect for tactics like this. They have nothing to do with shedding light on a situation or enhancing your understanding of it or trying to build a better world. It's entirely about activating the part of your, what is it, the amygdala? Fear and disgust. The part of your brain that makes you make terrible fucking decisions. The part of the brain that is, and this is not an exaggeration or a joke, physically larger in right-leaning individuals. That is not a joke. That is literally true. That part of the brain that makes you feel fear and disgust is enlarged in conservatives. You know, I talk about there not being a categorical difference in the brains, but in this respect, there's data to back it up. Though this is a difference that is cultivated. The parts of your brain that you use are the ones that get stronger. After all, you know, you do math, you get better at math, you feel fear and terror all the time, you experience fear and terror all the time. Those parts of your brain get stronger. I have no respect for it.
What we've heard tonight is that nothing justifies October the 7th, but October the 7th justifies everything. Well, I'm here tonight to tell you, no, October the 7th does not justify everything. It does not justify the suffering in Gaza. It does not justify the killing of kids in Gaza. It does not justify the starvation in Gaza. It does not justify the rape and torture of Palestinian detainees, which Elon refused to condemn tonight. It does not justify any of that. It doesn't justify the tearing up of the Geneva Conventions, the defiance of international law and the ICC and our own...
Notice how when Mehdi Hasan describes the many brutalities that Israel has committed and that the fascist refuses to condemn, he doesn't luridly describe it with 30 seconds of disgusting, dripping detail. He just lists it because he's interested in an actual, factual accounting of what has happened and what should be done. He's not interested in relying on shortcutting to people's emotional senses of fear and rage and disgust. He can rely on an actual, logical position to do the work for him.
Ladies and gents, if you're here tonight to defend what Israel's done, knowing full well what Israel has done, if you're defending the human suffering in Gaza, the amputation of little kids, if you're doing that in full knowledge, then you're not just here to defend the indefensible or justify the unjustifiable. I'm sorry, you're a sociopath. And I will say to you, please don't be a sociopath tonight. Don't support war crimes. Don't defend a genocide. Join me and every human rights organization in the world, every humanitarian aid agency on the planet, every American doctor and nurse who's been out to volunteer in Gaza. Join us in opposing this ridiculous and offensive and horrendous motion. And on behalf of the Al-Dos family, who Elon clearly doesn't give a damn about, I beg to oppose this motion.
Stop fighting! Is this an actual balanced audience? One half of the audience is clearly here for Hasan and the other half is here for the fascist. That was a good-ass video. Man, I really like him. I really like Mehdi Hasan. I really do.